Washington Fish Questers, Blake here. Well, I tell you, it's about the lowest tide I can remember. It's a negative 4.29, so basically a negative 4.3. So I'm headed down to my local beach that I have access here to, and I'm going to show you what I would do if I was approaching a new beach to dig for horse or gooey duck clams. So I'm going to cover, you know, just kind of like where the clams might be on the beach, how I'd actually spot the clams, and then the difference between a horse clam and a gooey duck show, which I did in the short. So if you've seen the short, maybe you can skip that part, but I'll go a little more in depth. Oh, I'm excited. I don't think I've ever seen this beach below like a negative about 3.5, so it's, you know, dang near a foot lower than that. So I am really pumped to see how low this is going to be. Woo, look at that low tide. Yeah, I've never seen it so low, as I said. You look over there, I can see a moorage buoy. Let's see if I can find it on film. There it is. Look at that. You'd probably be in like 3 feet of water out there, you know. That's wild. I've never seen it that close. Wow. Before we begin, in case you're wondering why I'm not digging and why there isn't 1,000 diggers out here, it's because this particular beach is closed for shellfishing. So that's why I just get to come out and observe. These horse and gooeys are kind of like my pets. So regarding approaching the beach, if you read Fish and Wildlife's webpage, it says that a lot of gooey duck beaches don't have gooey ducks, besides at a -2 tide. That information on a lot of beaches, although technically true, I suppose, is probably needs to be updated a bit. Let's say you go to Doziwalp State Park. Good luck finding a gooey duck if it's anything above like a -3.6. I mean, it's got to be low, and I wouldn't even probably go to Doziwalps anymore unless it was like a -3.8 or so. I mean, it has to be like a hard place to get those ducks. So what I'm saying is I approach the beach. If it's a beach that isn't a boat-only access beach, I walk down, you know, to at least probably about where it'd be like a -3 before I start to, you know, look for any signs of ducks. However, if it is a boat-only access, you might find them at -2 or even a little higher. So, you know, basically if it's a beach that people have a hard time getting to and the gooey ducks are kind of just like growing as they naturally would, you can find them quite a bit higher on the beach. But if it's a beach anybody can walk onto, I wouldn't bother with basically above -3, unless you're going for horse clam. You can find horse clams as low as like -1. So, you know, there's different types of gooey duck beaches. This one has got very it's not eelgrass, it's just some seaweed on the bottom here. You know, most of the beaches I dig in Hood Canal are covered in eelgrass, and then a lot of the South Sound beaches that are open are just like solid mud, like nothing but mud. So different beach types, you know, that calls for different digging apparatus, which I know I wasn't going to cover, but when I'm in a place like Hood Canal, I like to use a post holer because it's so rocky, the hole maintains its, whoa, one just squirted and scared the heck out of me. That was hilarious. I like to use a post holer because of and I'm looking around. I'm surrounded by horsies. I see like 6 of them right now. I'll show you in a second though. At any rate, if I'm in a harder substrate, I like to use a post holer because the hole maintains some integrity. If I'm down in the South Sound where it's just like mud, then you got to use a gooey duck tube or like a hollowed out trash can or something to keep that mud out. I've seen family affairs where people have dug out like a crater, and you can do that, but oof, it's a lot of work. So if you can find any way to keep that mud out, it's the way to go. Oh geez, I thought I was surrounded by horse clams, but it looks like a lot of these are gooey ducks. So let me show you a good example of a gooey duck. So yeah, look at this. Wide open siphon holes to the point that it almost looks like a piddock, but I know it's not because the siphons are connected. There's a third type of clam called a piddock, but the siphons would not be connected if it was. So you can see 2 wide open siphons, nothing inside, just clear. I mean, you can put your finger down there. Dare I? Sorry about that, buddy. You can kind of see how it squirts up. And just soft to the touch. So 2 open siphons, soft to the touch, and no kind of protection around the siphon, I should say, and I'll tell you why that's important here when I go find a horse clam. So here's a horsey. So you see it has, this actually has 2 connected siphons, just like the gooey duck, but it has this leathery flap that kind of protects them, so sometimes it doesn't look that way. If you can see inside that open siphon there, it has little tentacles. So the horse clam, unlike the gooey duck, has little tentacles inside the siphon, often has this little leathery shield on it, and that leathery shield can grow things like barnacle and algae and that sort of thing. It kind of really helps it blend in, but yeah, so this is a horse clam. Geez, and you see that, how it sprays up like a hose, like someone with their finger over the hose. Whereas a gooey duck, when it shows like that with the spray, it's usually just like a little squirt. I'll go poke another gooey duck so you can see the difference. So this is a gooey duck, kind of hidden in the kelp there, and maybe the identification's a little harder because of that, because you can only see the one siphon hole. But I will go ahead and rub it, and you see that? Actually, for a gooey duck, that was a pretty good squirt. A lot of the time, it's just like a bloop. Like it's just a little, kind kind of like a squirt from a hose without your thumb on it, I guess, if you're trying to find the shows through that way. You see in all the different types of kelp at a negative 4.29 that I don't usually get to see when it's, you know, more like a negative 3. If you feel any guilt as a wreck digger for getting the gooey ducks, about 90% of gooey ducks will never see low tide. You know, they're deeper than that. So at least as far as we go, we can't put too big of a dent in them, even if we've tried. The limit's been 3 apiece per day since, I guess it's been for about 75, 80 years at this point, so that's remained unchanged. So, and you know, Fish and Wildlife would obviously tighten it up if they felt like it was needed, but you know, in theory, a beach will reseed if it's, you know, harvested kind of too heavy, kind of like Dozy Wallops has been, unfortunately, in the last several years, and some of the other more popular beaches. Two side by side. So as you can see here, the horse clam has a leathery flap. If you can see inside the siphons, that have little tentacles in there, and when you feel it, it's rough to the touch. You can also see it sprays water up like someone put their thumb over a hose. Right next to it here is a gooey duck. So if you feel this, it's smooth to the touch. It's muddy, but smooth to the touch. Has no tentacles inside there. If you're ever able to see inside there, they're perfectly open. This one didn't spray. If it would have, it just probably would have been like a little blarp. So it's a good way to compare them side by side there. It is really wild being out here on a beach that you can't harvest on, because they are all over the place, you know. The average, I can't imagine what it is, but there's certainly a horsey or a ducky, you know, probably in a, I'll say 5x5 square. You know, I mean, they're just all over. So that's what it's like when you can't actually harvest them. It's my understanding that if you took all of the, this is from a Gooey Duck documentary I watched. I totally forgot the name. I'll put it here because it's slipping my mind. I know it's like a documentary, but I don't know if that's the actual name. But a biologist in that film said that if you took all the biomass in Puget Sound of all the different species, you know, took all the whales, all the fish, the species with the most biomass in Puget Sound is the gooey duck, unless that's changed due to overharvest. But they are prolific in Puget Sound, and I've also heard, but I don't have like a scientific backing to make this claim, but I have heard that this is the epicenter of gooey duck, Puget Sound in general, just because we have so much kind of like soft mud, you know, and it's like the perfect climate for them and all that stuff. They can really thrive here, and they can live to be like 160 years old. I'll put the date here if I get it wrong, but I know after like 5 or 6 years they're basically to like an adult, you know, fully sized gooey duck. There's a Pacific graceful crab molt, often confused with a juvenile Dungeness. You can tell it's not, kind of by the coloration and sort of the smoothness of the ridges, if that makes sense, the way its shell's kind of formed there. They are very closely related to Dungeness, but that is indeed a Pacific graceful crab, and that's just a molt, so it could grow bigger. Alright, so before I talk about spotting them on the beach, let's go ahead and do a little quiz. I'm going to, let's look at 5 different shows, and you tell me if it's a gooey duck or a horse clam. Here's number 1. It's kind of a messy looking one. What do you think? I'll give you to the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. It is a horse clam. Oh yeah, and that's another, oh, look at it go. You know, and you can really feel the toughness, the leathery shield. Even if they lack that leathery shield, which they will occasionally, they are still very tough to the touch, opposed to a gooey duck, which is soft to the touch. Alright, I won't count down this time, but here's the second show. What do you think it is? If you answered horse clam again, you are correct. Look at that, oh my gosh, what have I done? Alright, what do we got for number 3 here? If you guessed horse clam for a 3rd time, you're incorrect. That's a gooey duck. Yeah, see, that one didn't even squirt. That's a big one. Wow, look at this. Look at number 4. I'll tell you what, this is a big, huge clam. So what do you think? Number 4, what do we got here? What do we got? If you answered horse clam again, you're correct. That is a giant horse clam. Holy smokes. That looks like an alien spaceship or something. That is crazy how big that is. It's pretty high up too. It's amazing when you can't harvest. You know, you'll find giant ones at like a -1. Alright, so for the last one, this is actually going to be kind of challenging because you can see the siphon looks kind of gross. What do you think it is? This is actually a gooey duck. I could tell by the feel of it. So this is living in a stream, basically, in a freshwater area. You know, it's like the stream coming down. And from the looks of it, it was pretty gross. Just maybe I shouldn't say gross. Maybe I should say horse clam siphon-like, because of all of the kind of algae sort of on the siphon, which usually you don't see in a gooey duck. But that's just because of all the fresh water input just constantly running down here. And honestly, there's probably a lot of fecal chloroform in this water that I'm putting my hands in so freely. But yeah, that was a gooey duck. That was a good one to end on. But I needed to feel it to be absolutely sure. You may also have seen with that one, it didn't have the two visible open siphons. That will sometimes be the case, you know, if the Gooey Duck is kind of like starting to pull down, or if it's small. So the duck I dug earlier this year, you know, at a good legal open place last month, was a pretty small one, and I could tell it was a Gooey Duck, but its siphons were closed. And again, if you can get a feel on it, then great. Whoa, check this out. Here's a cool find. It is so shallow. I was looking, I was like, is that trash? No. It's a couple of anemones. Holy smokes, look how big they are. So there's my hand. So as you can see, it's like bigger than hand size, both of them. And they're right by each other. That is so cool. I didn't even know there was enough kind of hard ground out here, I guess, for them to be on. But very, very neat. Oh yeah, and one thing I forgot to mention about the noble horse clam, I talked about the Gooey Duck's longevity, but a horsey lives 29 years opposed to the Gooey Duck's like over 100. So unfortunately for the horse clam, it tends to come in second to the Gooey Duck and dang near everything. Well, that said, that second includes taste, so that's probably good as far as a survival perspective. It's a cockle! Cockle on the move. Oh, it stopped. Oh, there it goes. Look at this, everybody, a cockle. Oh, and regarding the shows, one thing I forgot to mention, often I'll go to a beach and they won't be on the surface. Maybe it's just like bad weather out or whatever, they're just not showing themselves. So you can get a decent guess of if it's a Gooey Duck or a horse clam by the show that they leave. If it's more circular like this, it's more likely to be a horse clam. And this here is an example of a Gooey Duck show. And I know this looks kind of circular, but as you can see, it's sort of oval. It's just got a little ovalness to it. Sometimes it'll be a lot more oval than that. So using the shows like that is not 100% certainty at all. It's probably like 70%, but you know, it's better to go off of than, you know, if you didn't know that. But if you see a big area where it's just a bunch of circles, you know, and they're pretty close to each other, you're probably in a horse clam bed, not going to get any Gooey Ducks there unless you do spot an oval show. Ooh, big old cockle. Look at that. Aren't they beautiful, folks? Look at those ridges. It's almost tropical looking, you know. Oh, got a juvenile moon snail here. You can't harvest these in Washington State. I'm used to them being really big though, you know. They have the grotesque foot, you know, coming off the bottom that like basically covers the shell. But yeah, when they're babies, they're pretty cute. All right, well, I've had the tide of my life, but I need to head back. Before I do, I told you I'd talk about actually finding them, which I will now. There's two main methods. You know, there's like the searcher method where you walk around and just look. I'll tell you how I see a lot of people. I don't know if it's, I mean, I guess it's just they might not know what they're doing yet, that they'll go down to the lowest point of the beach. You know, they'll go down to the very edge there, and they will walk it because it's, you know, what's exposed, so they figure people haven't hit it yet. So the mistake there is the ducks probably haven't shown yet, or the horsies for that matter. If it's totally placid, maybe, like today, like you know, we saw some in the water. If the water's a little rougher, a lot of the time the clams will wait for the tide to recede to show themselves. So I don't personally ever walk within about, I don't know, 15 feet of the edge. And then I'll just look, I'll walk and just look straight down with an eagle-eyed focus. You know, just looking straight down, running into everybody, you know, to see if I can see a Gooey Duck show. So that's how I like to do it, but I would advise not going down to the lowest point of the beach and like trampling it, because then what you can do is make them not show. Then the second way, which I find more effective than the first, although it's harder to practice, and it does take practice, is the spotter runner method. So what you do is you just have one person sit on a chair or a bucket, you know, just have them sit down and look at a track of beach, especially if it's a track of beach that you know Gooey Ducks are on with you from your personal experience. You know, or saw someone else dig one, whatever. As long as you know it's like a gooey ducky area, and you just sit there and you look out, you know. You just sit there. It's kind of boring, but you still need to have that just like laser focus, just looking at the beach. And then you have a second person. It's amazing how much having a second person is helpful. And when you see a show, you point at it and you tell them where to go. And you just keep your eyes on the show. And the show is usually a little spurt of water, or maybe the Gooey Duck's neck just breaking the surface. You do not let your eyes off it. Here it's okay because there's not much seaweed. In Hood Canal, where it's like just covered in mats of eelgrass, if you take your eye off it and go to it yourself, which is still, you can still do that. I mean, it's still like a successful way to go. It's amazing how many I've lost that way. So having a buddy is super duper helpful, and Gooey Ducking is way funner as a team sport anyway. Well, if you're new to Gooey Ducking, hope that was helpful. If you're not, hopefully it was enjoyable. But hope you get out and get them. Oh, and hey, I'm filming this in June on that super low tide I mentioned. There are some really low tides this year. We had some good ones in May, this basically super low in June, and there was 2 -4s in July, back-to-back days. So you might want to look those up. They're in mid-July 2022, but always check your tides if you're not watching this in 2022. Usually May, June, July are the lowest tide months, and then August usually has a couple pretty good ones. So thank you so much, and see you next time on Washington Shellfish Quest.